By a 3-to-1 margin. 3-to-1 margin, Americans believe there are only two genders. I never thought this would be news, but it is. And a majority, over 60%, support laws against transgender procedures for minors. Now, this finding comes from a recent Rasmussen Reports survey on Americans' true feeling on the transgender ideology being shoved down their throats. Whether or not the institutions of power and the legacy media choose to acknowledge it, they are on the wrong side regarding the transgender agenda. Joining me now to discuss this polling data and more and how it's playing out in our society is FRC's Meg Kilgannon. She serves as our Senior Fellow for Education Studies. She was a part of the Education Department in the Trump administration. Meg, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so this is actually not something that's surprising, but it is certainly encouraging because we're seeing, we're going to talk a little bit later with Mike Huckabee about how corporate America is taking a beating over embracing the whole LGBT trans agenda. But this shows, 60% of Americans, over 60%, actually 62%, support these laws like the SAFE Acts that FRC's been promoting. What did you find in this survey that you might not have been prepared to see?
I was really surprised at the level of lack of support of this among Democrats. The independent numbers didn't surprise me very much, but rank and file Democrats really don't support this particular agenda. And that's great to see.
What I found in there along those same lines is that the base of the Democratic Party is not with the party leadership on this. I mean, number one, women, 65% of women, more likely than men, over 10% difference, are saying that schools and teachers should not be allowed to counsel students. They don't want this agenda in the schools.
Right.
Americans with children at home are more likely than their childless peers to be supportive of these laws protecting children. And here's a really interesting one. Americans with annual incomes over $200,000 are more likely to want the government to push this agenda. And it's those earning between $30,000 and $50,000 a year who don't want this agenda around.
Right. That one was really kind of telling, I thought, too, because all the folks that go to the very best schools and can earn really high incomes are the ones that are getting indoctrinated
in this. It's the rich
in
white folks
right.
that are pushing this agenda, that went to these colleges and had their heads filled with all this nonsense, and they're wanting to proliferate this ideology.
And they're the ones, too, that can, they have the most options in life, right? They can afford a private school for their children. They can buy the kind of education for their children that they want to have, if they have children.
Yeah,
right?
Well, that's the issue there, if they have children. A lot of these don't have children.
Right.
Because you really can't, you can't escape this, even if you take your kids out of the public schools.
Right.
Because it's so permeating the culture. I mean, you can't walk into Target. I mean, you can't walk into any of these. It's everywhere.
Right. And, the other thing I thought was interesting about this poll and this agenda is this is the same kind of top-down agenda. And the businesses that support this were also the businesses that were, anointed the winners, the ones that could stay open during the shutdowns of COVID. They were, there's more to this pushback on this, I think, underneath all of this than just gender ideology. And the children who are victims of this are able to speak for themselves now. We're starting to see Chloe Cole, the young woman in California who had a double mastectomy at age 15 and regrets it now. She can tell her story in public. And that's going to move people's hearts if they're confused about this, which, thanks be to God,
well, they've tried to rush this agenda through. They've tried to tamp down any resistance by not allowing children to have counseling. Social media has silenced anyone who's challenged it. But the resistance is building.
Yes, yes. People have alternative sources of information now.
They have this program.
We have this program. We don't have to read the New York Times. We can read the Washington Stand. We don't have to watch CNN. We can watch Washington Watch and other shows. And thank goodness that kind of platform for people who are opposed to this is able to get some purchase and start to make a difference.
I just, in the building today was Walt Heyer, who was a man who went through the transitional, the surgeries and everything, and he realized that wasn't solving my problem. And now Walt is a powerful voice speaking to those who are detransitioning.
Right, and that I think that's so important to pushing back on this. The children that we lose to the Holocaust of abortion aren't able to speak for themselves, right? But this is a crime against nature that is going to have its own set of witnesses, and those people will be able to move hearts.
Well, we're almost out of time. I wanted to go back. I really wanted you to unpack this connection between COVID and this. I mean, this goes back to the mask and the heavy-handed nature of what we saw in the schools and in these
People know a totalitarian power grab when they see one, especially minority groups.
And so it's this indoctrination and this totalitarian overreaching,
right?
You do it my way or else.
You will use the pronouns. You cannot say that on social media or we will ban you.
Well, and it's the only way it works.
People react negatively to that.
It's the only way you can convince people that there's more than two genders.
Right.
You have to use the power and force of the state.
It takes a lot of force to tell a lie.
All right, Meg, you ran the clock out on me. I had more questions for you. Always great to see you.
Great to see you.
All right. I wasn't totally truthful with you before the break because I am back and so is Meg Kilgannon. What happened? This is what happens with live programming. Congresswoman Lisa McClain was actually called very quickly into a meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. So I don't know if she's going to join us or not. She's not here now. But that gives us an opportunity to continue our conversation, Meg. So thanks for sticking around.
No problem.
All right, let's talk a little bit about we're seeing more and more of these, what we call SAFE Act. We did the first one in Arkansas. This protects our children, save them from this experimental surgeries and drugs. Texas, latest state to pass one.
Right. Fantastic news. Governor
It was signed into law over the weekend.
Right. And that you're starting to see the crossover in state legislatures. Few Democrats now are starting
Not cross-dressing, but crossing over. Right.
Crossing over to vote for these bills that are...
Unpack that for a moment, because this is what we were talking about earlier, about how this is inconsistent with where many Democratic voters are. I mean, we're seeing this... I talked about this a couple of weeks ago with what we're seeing with the intersection of religious participation and voting. And we're seeing border counties in Texas on the southern border going red, voting Republican, because they attend church, and this agenda that the Democrats are pushing is incompatible with that.
Right. Coming to the United States for a better life does not include sex change surgeries for your children. Right? And indoctrination behind your back at school. That's not what people have in mind.
But this is happening among African American leaders.
Yes. So in Houston, where you were over the weekend, there were 3 or 4 House of Representatives members in the state of Texas House, right? African American Democrat legislators who crossed over to support the bill to stop surgeries on children there. So this is what we mean. This is the kind of momentum we're seeing that's reflected so often, so quickly at the local and state level.
So what's driving that? I mean, what's prompting them to do that? Because, I mean, that comes at a high price.
Sure. And they're the same kinds of legislators who will sometimes cross over and vote pro-life or will support family initiatives occasionally.
Well, we just saw that in North Carolina.
Right.
Where we actually had a Democratic lawmaker switched parties to support life bills that actually gave them a veto-proof majority.
Right. So this is the kind of movement that we want to see, right? The bodily integrity for children should be a 100% issue across of both parties.
Now, I know it's not for all, but what role is religion playing in this, in biblical understanding of the fact that God made us and he made us male and female?
Well, one of the legislators that crossed over in Texas gave a very eloquent speech about this, and she cited her faith in God as the reason that she had to support this legislation. So I think it plays a very big role.
So is that then a part of why the left wants to keep religion out of our schools and out of government? Every time it comes up, they have a hissy fit?
Of course, because this is their faith, right? Their faith is in government, and their faith is in not in God, and it's this especially the transgender agenda and the queer agenda for America is an assault on normativity, right? It's an assault on anything normal or norms,
Right.
any kind of moral authority that one would have.
Objective moral truth. And so all the more reason that as followers of Christ, we need to be compassionate, and our faith teaches us to be compassionate, but also teaches us to be bold and open about our faith. And so we can't be timid about our faith and compassionate, in my view.
Right.
Because if you're compassionate and you care, you will speak the truth. Now, you'll do it in a tone that is loving and with the heart of seeing people come to know the truth and being set free, but you have to speak it.
Absolutely, and we need the full body of Christ engaged on this. There are some of us who are called to sound the warning bells and to fight the political battles, and we need other people who are going to be there to minister to the refugees that are going to be coming into our churches, right? Who are looking for healing, and Jesus is the divine physician.
Yeah.
The healing for this comes from the Lord.
And that is so important, because I was just talking earlier, I mentioned in our last segment, Walt Heyer was here, I was talking with Dr. Jennifer Bowens. We were having a conversation. Almost always there's trauma related to this, and the healing is so essential. And what they're doing, instead of addressing the underlying trauma, the healing that needs to take place, they're compounding the hurt.
Yes.
So
often the people who have these procedures say, I thought that I was going to feel better when I changed my body to conform with my delusions, but I felt worse, right? And of course that's going to happen.
Yeah. You can't cover this up. You can't cover up the trauma. You've got to find the healing. And that healing is found in the truth.
Absolutely.
It is the truth that sets us free. All right, Meg Kilgannon, I do know that I think this is the last. We'll see. Maybe you'll be back for the next segment. I don't know. We'll see.